Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome. This is Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television from the economic hub of Nigeria and equally West Africa, Lagos. I am Henry Igwebike, and we'll love to start with our newspapers this morning, and from there we would move to our main conversation also for today. Do well to be part of what we do. Have a say in what we say. You can always find us at enterprisetvnews.com. You may equally like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV7. I'm very so honored to have with me, joining me via Zoom, Barrister His Greatness Agada Igo. He is a barrister, law public affairs analyst, to look through all that we have from our newspapers and possibly through our main conversation for today. Thank you so very much, Barrister, for your time.
Sure. Always a pleasure.
Barrister, I'd love us to start with the Daily Trust newspaper for today, this morning. We have the big story, Mariam Sanders' release, worst injustice to us. And that's coming from the husband's family. And above that particular story, we have other interesting stories. National Assembly wants election to hold earlier. Enugu Commissioner quit PDP as Mba joins the APC. And on the downstream of the same newspaper, universities short. ASUU rejects no work, no pay policy. Cameroon's coalition claims early victory in presidential poll. Barrister, I love us to start with Mariam Sanders' release, worst injustice to us, husband's family. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu granted clemency to about 176 inmates serving different forms of incarceration. But of course, what is good for one person is not good for another. The family of the deceased, that's the husband to Mariam Sanders, are not happy. As a barrister, what is your take on the clemency first, and do you think justice was done on this particular case?
And no doubt the president has the right to exercise clemency for convicted felons under Section 175 of the Constitution of Nigeria, as amended 1999. But he's also expected to exercise this authority for national interest, for national defense, and to enhance the interest of the nation. And it should not be done for private or personal concerns. And so what will first of all bother my mind is that the granting of clemency, as it is for 175 Nigerians, was it done in furtherance of the national interest? That's the question me and you should ponder about. And looking at it from social media, from mainstream media, as they have reported it, that almost 1/3 of those granted clemency were drug traffickers. And I do not see how that promotes national interest in any way or manner. I do not see that, because you know we have a serious narcotic issue in Nigeria as we speak. Hard drugs is a serious problem. Addiction to substance is a serious problem. So when you now grant clemency to people who are peddling, not even those who are even taking hard drugs, but those who are the ones who are the dealers, who are peddling drugs, you demoralize the strength and efficacy of the NDLEA officials who have been religiously combating substance trafficking in Nigeria. Then on the issue of pardoning somebody convicted for murder, I also do not think that serves the national interest, because it means that you are now giving the impression that people can get to carry out murder and get away with it. Even in highly civilized countries like America, The President of America does not exercise his authority to grant clemency for clemency's sake or to even satisfy whimsical political interests.
But
But
Donald
he
Trump
does
did
it
it. Barrister, we had it with Donald Trump. He forgave about 1,000 plus insurrectionists who wanted to take over the Capitol Hill. That was treason. It was a crime that should not be forgiven for any reason. But Donald Trump did that. So don't you think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is equally borrowing from Donald Trump, who is wielding his laws as much as he wants to, even if it doesn't satisfy the interests of the American country?
Number one, we should not follow bad example. That is clearly a bad example. People who wanted to overthrow democracy, 300 and so 20-something years of democracy, you grant them clemency. It is wrong. What is wrong in Nigeria. It is wrong in America. It is wrong in UK. And it is wrong in all countries in planet Earth. So you cannot justify it anything. And if you are following the American politics, Trump has suffered serious electoral consequences for that singular decision. And granting those insurrectionists pardon shows that, he has been in denial that he did not gauge them to do what they did. So it's a confirmation by granting them pardon and clemency. That one is a clear confirmation that he was even the brain behind carrying out insurrectionists against United States democracy in the way and manner they did. But what is important to us is that America is not a perfect democracy, and Donald Trump's administration has repeatedly proven this. Let us learn to borrow examples that are good. Why is it that Nigerians will always borrow examples that are poor, and that for example, now America has continued to be a functional democracy where votes and their ballot count. Let's borrow that. For example, now the American judiciary is efficient, effective. It delivers its determination timelessly. Let's borrow that example. For over 100 or so years, the American dollar has been strong and has become the world's currency. Let us borrow that. For example, American inflation rate for more than 15 years, even 30 years, has been less than 10%. Single digit inflation rate, single digit unemployment rate, single digit underemployment rate. Let's borrow these examples and follow suit. For example, now in America, when public officers are even accused of carrying acts of impropriety, they resign from office, whether judicial officers, executive officers, or legislative officers. Why don't we borrow from that? Why is it that it's only wrong examples that we are recurringly in the habit of borrowing and showcasing? Let's borrow. There are so many things to borrow from. For example, now, if you see America, you will hardly see any president or governor going to commission roads or bridges. Those are done by directors of parastatals and agencies who do that. What they bother about is policies. In America, their public officials show high-level accountability, not even to the other organs of government, but to ordinary, everyday citizens. Why don't we also borrow from that? Why must we always borrow wrong examples? So coming back home from where we started from, I in my own humble opinion, I do not believe that the clemency granted to the 175 Nigerians, majority of them, were done in good faith. But again, too, for example, now Herbert Macaulay was tried under the 1913 or 1914 law, pre-colonial law era. That's when he was convicted. You cannot give what you do not have. That law, pre-colonial laws, are not part of laws of the Federation in Nigeria. So, in my own humble opinion as a lawyer, I do not think the president has the powers to grant clemency for laws that were enacted and executed during pre-colonial era. Because if you take time to read that section 175 of the Constitution, 1999 as amended, it says that the president grants clemency to laws, acts of National Assembly. Acts of National Assembly. That's those are the laws. When you offend any acts of National Assembly, that's where the president has powers to grant law, not laws of pre-colonial era. So I want to believe that in granting clemency to Herbert Macaulay, the president was not well advised. Secondly, then again, let me just use this to answer this question so that we do not go back to it. In the case of Ken Saro-Wiwa, he was tried because certain people went to they attacked and killed the Ogoni 8. There was no direct evidence, or neither was any conspiracy shown during the trial at the tribunal that Ken Saro-Wiwa actively or indirectly participated or encouraged or aided and abetted the killing of the Ogoni 4 in any way or manner. Now, when you grant somebody like Ken Saro-Wiwa pardon means that it's an admission of guilt. It means that for doing something wrong, we are forgiving him. But the case of Ken Saro-Wiwa is that the family and all Nigerians, there was an outcry when he was found guilty, if you remember. I think in 1993, 94 or thereabout. To the extent that even the great iconic Mandela came to Nigeria then and advised General Sani Abacha not to go ahead to execute the Ogoni 9 with Ken Saro-Wiwa as a leader. And of course, General Abacha ignored the advice and went ahead to execute Ken Saro-Wiwa and the other Ogoni 9, and there was huge world outcry, and Nigeria became a pariah state, not only to the world, but also in Africa. Nigeria became a pariah state in Africa. After that, I think that happened in 1995. 1995, at least my memory serves me right. I can still remember that very well, that incident very well. So the case of Ken Saro-Wiwa is not a case of granting pardon, because what he's saying, and even we are saying, is that there was no fair trial in the first place. He was not guilty. He was not even around the locus, the scene of the crime. He was not found within it. Neither was any connection traced to him to have conspired, to have aided and abetted the murder of the Ogoni 4. So what we are saying, and I believe what his family is saying, is that that case should be tried, should be retried, because the trial of as far as we are saying, what we are saying is that was a kangaroo tribunal, and of course the proceeding of how he was even found guilty was not made public. There was no transparency. It appeared to have been premeditated. That was the impression even the whole world had, and that's why Nigeria, by that singular decision and action, became a pariah nation to the entire world.
All right.
So what, in that instance, for justice to be done to the Ogoni 9, there must be a retrial, post-mortem retrial of the Ogoni 9. with the hopeful verdict that they will be found not guilty. But if the pardon is saying that they are guilty, but now they have been forgiven, it does not assuage the pains and the burden and the anger of the families of the Ogoni 9. That is my take on that, sir.
All right, thank you so very much, Barrister. Now let's quickly move on to the Punch newspaper for today. We have the big story there. 2027, opposition splits over NAS, National Assembly poll shift. We have a rider, a very interesting one there. National Assembly bill seeks to move presidential gubernatorial polls to November 2026. PDP and NPP allege tenure extension plot as ADC and Labour Party equally differ on that particular story. ASUU strike grounds universities, federal government clamps down. And also, we have slain husband family slams Tinubu pardon for Mariam Sanda, which of course we had talked about. Barrister, let's take a look at what's happening with the leadership of Senate President Godswill Akpabio, who should be focused on more important things in the society. We have growing insecurity in the country. We have ASUU about to go to strike. We have fuel today is selling for 922 naira in Lagos and above 955 in other parts of the country. These are a laundry list of growing issues that the National Assembly should be looking at. But unfortunately, we have Senate President Godswill Akpabio-led administration that is more focused on shifting goalposts of when elections should be held and when it should not hold. Speak to me on this. Do you think they have lost focus at this point?
If you remember my earlier interview, which I granted your TV station on the morning show, I said that one of the bane of this present administration is that it appears to me that this present administration of Bola Tinubu is completely fixated at 2027. Completely. And the events that are unfolding every day just underscores this notion clearly, without doubt. So that every action and inaction they take or do not take is based on the lobbying, planning, and scheming for 2027 presidential election. And it is so clear. For example, now, even we who are not Americans, for example, we know that the next America has a date for election. Of course, they did their presidential election last year, 2024. And they'll do their next election 4 years time.
Yes.
I believe it's 2nd of November.
Yes.
2028. It has a date clearly. Whether the date is going to be Sunday, the date is going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it doesn't matter, but that's the date. It is known. Nigeria, our last presidential election, I believe, was February 2023. So
yes. February 25th.
Made up our mind that the next election will be coming up February 2027. So that then February 2027, then 3 months later, the winner of that election will be sworn in as president. So all this shifting of goalposts, going back, distortion here and there, is only creating instability in our electoral processes and is further reducing considerably the confidence Nigeria have in the electoral process as per whether we will achieve a free, fair, credible election in 2027. And what government should be all about is how to inspire people to have confidence in the electoral process. If you remember my analogy, the last interview we had, I said that from the way things stand now, our democratic experience is becoming government of the minority, government of even the minute minority. Because, for example, now, in the last presidential election, out of 220 million or thereabout, only about 98 million Nigerians registered, which is about 40% of the total population of Nigeria. And out of these 98 Nigerians, from the last presidential election, only about 22 million Nigerians voted, which is about 10% of 220 million Nigerians. So if 10% of Nigerians are those that are participating in our electoral process, then we cannot say we are operating democracy. Government for the people, by the people, the government for the people and by the people, through the people, for the benefit of the people. What we are actually doing is that we are just operating government by the minority, government formed by the minority. 10%, if you write any kind of exam and you get 10 over 100, that is gross failure, complete failure. So, and I've made this point that, and if we continue to put in place policies that makes Nigerians, the vast majority of Nigerians, to continue to be disenchanted with these democratic processes, they have their right to participate and they have their right to abstain. More Nigerians will abstain. And when more Nigerians will abstain, then the majority of Nigerians will say, we need a new system of governance. The truth about the whole thing is that what many of our leaders of today do not appreciate is that if majority of Nigerians rise up and decide that we want another form of government apart from Nigerians, so it will be.
Yes.
So it will be. Because they are the employers of those in government. The people of Nigerians, they are the employers, they are the lords of the executive, they are the lords of judges, of the judiciary, they are the lords of the legislators, the parliamentarians. It is what they say, what they agitate, what they demand that will stand, that will be the case. And so every organ of government must be extremely careful to ensure that whatever they do, they are indeed working to fulfill the desires and expectations and demands of their bosses, of their lords, which is Nigerian. Because, for example, now, maybe we feel that we must have judiciary all the days of our life. But like in the days of Samuel, if Nigerians rise up today and say, we do not want judges anymore, we don't no more want court system, we no more want lawyers, that will be what will happen. The judiciary will cease to exist.
But
if, for example, Nigerians rise and say, for example, now we don't want Supreme Court, we want to abolish Supreme Court. Supreme Court will stop to exist. So every public servant must be conscious that they owe their existence. They owe the existence of whatever office they occupy to the whims and caprices of majority of Nigerians. And so they must work to satisfy their desires, their demands, even if they do not agree with it.
It's actually very so unfortunate, Barrister, that Nigerian leaders fail to learn from history. What brought about the first coup of 1966 was a very similar issue when politicians couldn't trust themselves. Akintola and Obafemi Awolowo, their crisis actually led to the western part of the country not really going on well, which of course led to so many other issues, and that brought about the first coup in Nigeria. We hope that our leaders of today would not repeat the same mistake. But just as we talk about Nigeria, Barrister, let's go to Cameroon. Currently, the voting process in Cameroon has come to an end, and the two major big guys on that particular ballot, the Paul Biya, the 92-year-old great-grandfather, and another person, Issa Chiroma, who is 79-year-old. But of course, what we have right now is that the coalition of Issa Chiroma is leading on the ballot pass. But I love your take on Cameroon, especially with the personalities like Paul Biya, who has been there, the longest serving president in the world. What's your take on this, and what lessons do you think as Nigerians we can learn from what is happening in Cameroon?
I think the lessons we have to draw from Cameroon is that this is a serious African disease that has made African to be largely retarded. If you do your statistics, your analysis very well, statistical analysis, you find out that out of all the continents in the world, Africa is the most backward and retrogressive because of not only bad leadership, but the perpetuation of bad leadership. Forgive me for saying this, in perpetuity. Somebody has been president for 8 years, and yet he's still fighting to ensure that he continues to remain there, even at 90-something years, even at 90-something years, against the desires of almost all his countrymen. And this, like the heart, you have to look at lack of patriotism is at the heart of this. Because somebody who is patriotic, even if he's fit, unable to contest and win, he can even sacrifice his ambition for the good of his country. But this is in reverse gear. He's ready to sacrifice the future, the destiny of his children, his grandchildren, his generation, his entire country for his personal, perpetual, inordinate ambition. And you can see why we are where we are. Why we are where we are. Lack of proper personnel, lack of proper leadership. Round hole in square pegs, square holes, square pegs in round holes. Because, of course, you will agree with me that there are much brighter, intelligent, competent citizens of Cameroon who can lead his country from wherever it is now to the next level. But by going into this election, and it appears that from what we see is going to be a do-or-die election, and with all the antics that are employable in realizing this lifetime ambition quest, anything, all the instruments of state can be deployed, all the instruments of electoral malfeasance and malpractice can equally be deployed. You cannot rule them out. So Africa, and this has been why you see that, in some African democracies, coup took place in some certain backward, the marginal gains we have made in our African democratic journey. So the lesson from Africa is that, number one, leaders or people who desire to be leaders must be ready to be truly patriotic. Leaders and prospective leaders must be selfless and sacrificial. Leaders and prospective leaders must be ready to give up their ambition or inordinate ambition for the good of their countries. Leaders and prospective leaders must be ready to be the chief promoters of due process, due diligence, rule of law, and living by example. Living by example. I'm sure if President Paul Biya is living by example, Cameroon will not find itself in the electoral quagmire that it is presently in. it is presently in, which, if it is not properly handled, has the potential of turning Cameroon into a major crisis center if it is not properly handled, based on what the feedbacks we have been getting from the populace as a result of the aftermath of the elections. So it is also the last lesson I want African leaders to know is that even though God is the ultimate decider of what we are and what we will become, the future of Africa is actually in our own hands. Our destiny is in our hands. And where we are now, presently, is as a result of the poor choices those who have led African nations have made or have chosen not to make. And when we have the crop of sacrificial, focused, visionary leaders in the like of Nelson Mandela, who are ready to do the right thing at serious personal cost, then we can hope to become a great nations like United States of America, UK, and other world powers.
Thank you so very much, Barrister. And it's very important that we note here that Paul Biya actually started from as the Prime Minister of Cameroon from 1975 to 1982. From 1982, he now assumed the position of the president from 1982 up until today. And he still wants to go for another 4 years again, which makes him the longest serving president in the world, about 50 years in the making. And Barrister truly made it very known. His lack of patriotism, and that's the reason. Paul Kagame of Rwanda is equally pursuing the same race also. From 2000, he has assumed the president of Rwanda, and up until today, he feels he's the best person. Of course, give it to Rwanda, they are doing an awesome job, but remaining there as the only person that can make Rwanda what it is actually not good enough and not democratic. Just to let us know that Barrister would be here to take us on our main conversation. That is when we return. Federal government enforces no work, no pay as ASUU strike grounds universities nationwide. In a bit, still Enterprise Morning. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.